Nahash, Steelshod, Adversaries, and Castellines. Salerno and Zeno assess the battle and find it to be total chaos. At least 3 distinct battles, really. Far to the north, at least 3 different forces are tangled in a bloody melee. Introducing another force to this seems unwise. Directly north of their position, a relatively small force of Serpentes are beset by swarming hordes of barbarians. To the west, Duke Diaz's Septimanians have taken up a defensive position and lured a sizable chunk of barbarians off of the main horde. And of course, to the northwest, the largest battle rages. A wide, dense throng of barbarians crashes into a line of Tarathian soldiers. The Tarathians are outnumbered, but not so badly. Worse, most of their battle lines are clearly comprised of green conscripts. To his Castelline sensibilities, this middish practice, forming the backbone of your defenses from untrained peasants armed with whatever they can find at hand, it's vulgar at best and pure disaster at worst. Here, they seem to be holding relatively well for the most part, though their east flank is clearly hard-pressed. Nevertheless, Salerno can see that this is where the battle is truly to be decided. He takes his own Phrygians, the 2 Praetorian legions he has brought, and Matteo and Decimus Socii legions, dispatches orders for them to prepare to assault the southeastern flank of the main barbarian hordes. The questionable legions begin arriving, those that had traveled with these barbarians and fought at their side. Salerno doesn't fully trust them, but from what Rossi's communications suggest, they are desperate to get out from under the Sephardic thumb. He considers where is the safest place to send them. Salerno himself is a still newly minted praetor, and has not won the loyalty of the legions yet. Vitale Octavianus, on the other hand, is legendary across every corner of the empire. He tells Vitale to take his 2nd legion and the defecting legion regiments. They are to strike out north and hit the smaller barbarian horde from the rear, relieving the beleaguered Serpentes. Vitale loves these orders. "Form up, men," he bellows. "Let's show these Tarathian monks what real warriors look like." The 2nd Legion shouts an enthusiastic assent, and even the haggard, depleted, defecting legions seem to respond positively. Orders given, the legions mobilize. Salerno brings 5,000 men to bear against Terbjornsson's rear flank, another distraction that his army can scarcely afford. Still, most of his elites have now pressed to the front lines. He is rapidly shifting his priorities. He shuffles the rabble towards the rear, the undisciplined hordes of Krigars and Svards that make up the bulk of his army. They will not likely be able to overpower so many disciplined legionaries, but they will fight hard and tie up the legions for long enough. At this point, the battle looks something like this. On the edge of the main battle, Steelshod's archers and Brickar's Bearsarks continue to jockey for ranged supremacy. Felix emerges from hiding and puts a solid hit down on the Bearsark. He feels pretty good about himself, but Brickar is a frost Bearsark, clad in frost iron plate and mail courtesy of Aleifir the Smith. He is an archer, but he is not remotely squishy. Felix exposed his position to take the shot. Brickar returns with a series of rapid shots of his own. Felix is lucky enough to only take a single arrow, and it catches in his mail. Even so, it punches through the iron links and draws blood from his side. Brickar is a little bit of like a combination of Ben and Felix, if I'm being honest. Rapid fire, like Ben, but his shtick, rather than being stance and kill zone focused, is focused on single targets with a tier called tight grouping. And, like Felix, his arrows pack a huge punch, with lots of raw damage and penetration. Felix drops out of sight, hurries off to find new vantage. Like Amos, his preferred sniping is the shoot-and-scoot method. While Felix repositions, Ben and the other archers keep a steady pressure on Brickar and his Bearsarks. Dylan joins them, calling the men together, enacting his maneuver, a focused fire attack that he uses on Brickar. A deadly hail of arrows bombards the Frost Bearsark. By the time Felix pops up again, Brickar is falling back out of easy range, leaving most of his Bearsarks to keep pressure on the Tarathian archers. Felix scans the battlefield again, trying to assess the current threats. Dagrun is being assaulted on many sides by Steelshod. Tarvald is engaged as well. Then he sees Unferth. Unferth is wearing Perrin down easily, deflecting arrows that come at him, batting aside the few Tarathians that are brave enough to step up, slashing and stabbing at Perrin, not devastating him, but whittling him down without difficulty. Bear, Zelda, Gwyneth, and some of the sons are regrouping. But even as they advance on Unferth, more of Unferth's feral, vicious Berserks have begun cutting their way through the dazed and doomed lines. The Axemen engage the Berserks, trying to fight their way through to help Perrin. From a different angle, Leona and Olivenko are pushing through the crowd to join the fight. Felix takes careful aim. A difficult shot between all the moving forms on the battlefield. He takes his shot. Unferth seems to sense it, twists to face Felix, bats the arrow out of the air with his poleaxe. He's moving so fast. He turns back to Perrin, staggers him with a mighty blow. Perrin goes down on one knee, but before Unferth can strike again, Leona and Olivenko are there. They lash out at Unferth. Olivenko uses an iron sword, staying back a little, mindful of his light armor and lack of a left arm to wield a shield or parrying dagger. Leona gets in Unferth's face, stabbing aggressively. Unferth defends with his shield and studies her for a moment. "You have changed," he observes. "I am Leonskar," Leona snarls, "and I will kill you." She ducks through Unferth's defenses, gets in a good hit. He staggers slightly from the impact, but doesn't really flinch. "Good," he says. "You have come a long way. Embrace your animal nature." Leona wants Unferth to be surprised by her newfound strength. She wants him to be hurt. She wants him to fear. She does not want him to be pleased with her. She roars in frustration, redoubling the ferocity of her attacks. Meanwhile, the western flank of the battle fares the best for Steelshod, mostly due to the low pressure aside from the disrupted cavalry charge. Gunnar commands from the rear due to his injuries. Robin also lends some support, also from the rear. Alejandra's cavalry sandwich the Svards and remaining enemy cavalry, pressing them into the Tarathian spears. Robin clambers up onto a rock and waves to Alejandra happily, almost eats an enemy javelin for his trouble, and hops back down. In the center, Alexander smashes into Tarvald's steel pelt again and again. The Berserk is truly encased in steel and hard as hell to seriously hurt, but Levin's sword has dented the armor in half a dozen places. Anatoly has drawn blood stabbing through the gaps, and Alexander's sword has left several deep gouges in the plate. Tarvald is still putting up a serious fight. Finally, Yoren has had enough of being sidelined. He rides up, Varley following him carefully behind. Yoren rides through his allies, gets Tarvald into clear view, draws his reflex bow, takes aim at a weakened point in the steel that Alexander had battered, fires. The arrow punches through the gouge, widening it substantially, inflicting a painful wound. Anatoly darts in, seeing his chance, and rams his spear in behind Yoren's shot. He drives the spear into Tarvald's chest, and the Berserk's chest and mouth begin making gurgling, choking noises. Yoren's Tier 9 crack defenses can, semi-permanently, reduce an enemy's protection from armor, and there was rarely a better target for it than a man like Tarvald. Alexander looks over his shoulder, nods appreciatively to his best friend and right-hand man. In his death throes, Tarvald reaches out to Anatoly, grabs hold of him, squeezes, and topples over, dragging the Ruskan outrider off his horse to the slushy, bloody earth. Oliver scurries forward, helps Anatoly back into the saddle while Alexander and Levin press forward to keep the various other Svardic riffraff off him. Anatoly takes the saddle again, but he is pale, injured, and his spear and bow were both lost in the scuffle. He pulls back a little to rearm. Leona strikes at Unferth with everything she has. He continues fighting defensively, quietly speaking to her, encouraging her to fight, to give in to her rage and animal instincts. "Shut up!" she screams at him. She lunges for his heart, and he takes a solid hit to the chest of his iron breastplate. "You have so much to learn still, little lion," he says dispassionately. "But I think I can help." She ignores him, striking again, catching his shield. He steps closer to her, and as she pulls back her spear for another mighty blow, he speaks. "Fell." The word slithers into her ears and takes root in her heart. She staggers, feels that familiar rage that she thought she had contained begin to bubble up. She doesn't strike. Unferth smiles, blocks a probing attack from Olivenko. Leona stands still, warring internally. She feels an uncontrollable rage begin to rise inside her. Indiscriminate. She tries to channel it, direct it all at Unferth, but she just wants to rip her teeth into the nearest, most vulnerable piece of flesh. And that's not Unferth. She turns, nearly strikes down a random Tarathian conscript. He cowers away from her, and she barely stays her hand. Hubert's Simaruta, still worn beneath her mail, feels hot against her chest. Her pulse pounds in her ears. What did Unferth do to her? "Leona!" Olivenko calls. "Control yourself. Remember who your enemy is." The voice cuts through the rage. A little bit. She turns around again, sees Unferth smiling at her. An empty smile, devoid of happiness. She stabs at him, but her arm is shaking, her movements unsteady. He blocks easily. Olivenko tries to strike his flank. He beats aside Olivenko's sword and rakes the Spitalian bravo with his poleaxe. Olivenko staggers, bleeding from the attack. Unferth looks back to Leona. A predatory look. A hungry look. He opens his mouth, and she knows he's going to say it again. That word. She doesn't understand it, but she fears it. Unferth's mouth forms the first letter, then staggers, the wind knocked out of him as a battering ram crashes into his back. Not literally, but Zelda may as well be. She's broken through the feral Berserks to join the fight here and help her friend Leona. She smashes her broadaxe into Unferth's back in a rampage of quick hacking strikes. Unferth is momentarily staggered, and Leona takes a deep breath, struggling to calm herself. Dagran Thrisewed has fallen. The onslaught of so many of Steelshod's finest was too much for her. Leon raises his flail triumphantly, shouting a cheer. Miles calls out a warning, and Leon turns and barely raises his shield in time. A javelin slams into the shield, exploding into fragments of iron and wood and splintering the long kite shield. From a few ranks back, Jorg Spearbreaker frowns in annoyance. The Lorinet Chevalier still stands in the saddle, only slightly staggered from the throw. He hefts another javelin, carefully considers his next target. Felix mutters a curse, as his view of Unferth has remained obstructed, between Olivenko, Leona, and now Zelda. He scans the battlefield, spots Jorg just as the Spearbreaker throws at Leon, sees Jorg draw another javelin. This target he likes. It's a long shot, but Jorg is surrounded by enemies, not allies, so a miss will not be potentially catastrophic. Jorg raises his arm, darts forwards a few steps for momentum. Felix raises his bow, anticipates Jorg's charge, leads the target. Felix looses the arrow. Jorg whips his arm back, and then forward. And Felix's arrow slams right through Jorg's right forearm. The shot is fouled. Jorg screams in pain. The arrow has penetrated between the two bones of his forearm, fully half of the arrow on either side. The Spearbreaker is a powerful weapon when pointed at the right target, but he is a mortal man clad in relatively light armor. And his throwing arm is fucked. Before Felix can draw another bead on him, Jorg withdraws into the ranks of the Svardic forces. Alexander and Levin secure a small scrap of the battlefield. He sees that his other cavalry have prevailed. Evan withdraws, wounded by the Berserk, but Gerald and Leon ride over to him, while Miles rushes in from the other direction, picking his way through the crowd, trying to help the eastern flank against Unferth. Alexander glances over his shoulder, sees Joran and Varley and even Michel mounted just a single rank back, watching, ready to support. He steels himself, turns to face the enemy. He knew what he would find. The chaff of random Krigar warriors and Svartic raiders have scattered. The Bearsarks and champions fan out to the left and right. Behind them, only a short distance, rides Zabello Sakapis, further to the front of the battle than he normally would be. And at the front of them, a white bearskin-clad Bearsark. The white bearskin-clad Bearsark. Terbjornsson. He advances on Alexander as Alexander's men fan out to his flanks. "Steelshod," Terbjornsson says. His voice is low, conversational, but it booms loud enough to be heard over the din of the battlefield. "Ragnar," Alexander says. The Jarl of Jarls pauses, just for a moment, at the sound of his true name. But then he tightens his grip on his long steel sword and steel-headed axe. He steps closer, putting Alexander inside his long reach. "The time has come for you to die." Thank you for tuning in to Steelshod, a series by Mostly Rights, narrated by Tailforge. You can find every chapter in text format, as well as character sheets, setting information, maps, and rule documents on the Steelshod tabletop system in the link below. If you'd like to support the channel, you can pop down to the description and use the Patreon link for recurring donations, the PayPal.me link for one-time donations, the Teespring link for shirts with the incredibly cool background art by Nobody, or use the DriveThruRPG affiliate link the next time you're looking to try a new system. If you'd like to support the author, you can find Steelshod merch on the MostlyRights.com store, or donate to the Mostly Rights Patreon, which are both linked on reddit.com/r/mostlyrights down below.